This story is not just a tale, it happened in real life. A chilling event that left an entire town in fear, a story whispered in hushed voices even years later. It all began on a cold winter night in 1995. The small town of Millfield, Pennsylvania, was blanketed in thick snow, its streets quiet, its houses glowing with warm lights. Everything seemed peaceful, ordinary, safe. But what happened inside one particular house on the outskirts of town shattered that illusion forever. The house belonged to the Carter family. James Carter, a hardworking man in his late 30s, lived there with his wife, Linda, and their 2 young children, Emily and Noah. They were an average, happy family. No history of tragedy, no strange happenings, just another household in a quiet town. Until that one night when everything changed. James was sleeping soundly when a faint, rhythmic sound pulled him from his dreams. Knock, knock, knock. He opened his eyes, groggy, disoriented. The room was dark, the only light coming from the dim glow of the street lamp filtering through the curtains. He turned to his wife, who was still asleep beside him, undisturbed. Knock. Knock. The sound was soft, almost hesitant, but distinct. James sat up in bed, his heart beating faster. He listened carefully, straining his ears. The knocking was coming from the bedroom door. He frowned, glancing at the clock. 2:43 a.m. Too late for a visitor. Too late for anything normal. A shiver ran down his spine. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. Silence. James slowly got out of bed, his bare feet touching the cold wooden floor. He hesitated before reaching for the doorknob. With a deep breath, he turned the handle and pulled the door open. The hallway was empty, stretching into the darkness. He squinted, peering into the shadows. Nothing. No one. A sense of unease settled over him like a thick fog. He turned his head toward the children's room. Could it be one of them? James walked down the hallway, his footsteps eerily loud in the silence of the night. He pushed open their bedroom door gently, careful not to wake them if they were asleep. Emily and Noah lay in their beds, breathing deeply, undisturbed. James let out a quiet sigh of relief. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe the sound was from outside, the wind against the windows, trying to shake off the unease. He turned back toward his room, but as soon as he stepped into the hallway again, he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, it was coming from inside his bedroom. James froze mid-step, his breath catching in his throat. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if something unseen was pressing down on him. He slowly turned his head toward the slightly ajar door of his room. Something wasn't right. He stepped closer, peering inside. The bed, where Linda still lay asleep, was undisturbed. The closet door, however, it was open, just a crack, a small sliver of darkness peeking through. James' pulse pounded in his ears. He was sure that closet had been closed before he left the room. He swallowed hard, stepping forward cautiously. He reached out with a trembling hand, gripping the edge of the closet door. With one swift motion, he pulled it open, empty. Just clothes hanging neatly in place, shoes lined up at the bottom, nothing unusual. James exhaled sharply, feeling foolish for letting his imagination run wild. He turned away. But then, a whisper, soft, almost playful, "Don't turn around." James felt every hair on his body stand on end. His blood ran cold. The whisper had come from right behind him, but there was no one there. His body stiffened, his breath caught in his throat. He could feel someone standing just inches behind him. A presence. Cold, watching, waiting. His mind screamed at him to run, but his feet felt glued to the floor. The whisper came again. Closer, more insistent, I said. "Don't turn around." James clenched his fists, his heart hammering against his ribs. The air around him grew ice cold. His skin prickled with an unnatural chill. Summoning every ounce of courage, he spun around. Nothing, just his empty bedroom. His wife still peacefully asleep, unaware of the horror unfolding. James stumbled back, his breath ragged. The closet door slammed shut on its own. The loud bang made Linda stir. She blinked awake, groggy. "James, what's wrong?" He turned to her, his voice shaky. "Did you hear that?" Linda frowned. "Hear what?" James pointed at the closet. Linda sighed, rubbing her eyes. "Go to sleep, James. You're imagining things." James didn't argue. He knew what he had heard, what he had felt. He sat awake the entire night, staring at the closet, waiting. But nothing happened. Morning came, sunlight streaming through the windows. chasing away the darkness. Everything seemed normal. James convinced himself it had been a bad dream, just his mind playing tricks on him, but deep down, he knew it wasn't. And soon, the nightmare would truly begin. Because 3 nights later, the knocking returned, but this time, it was louder, more forceful. And James wasn't the only one who heard it. The knocking didn't stop. Boom, boom. Each hit against the door sent vibrations through the walls, rattling the picture frames, making the light fixtures sway. James sat up, breathless, his heart hammering inside his chest. He turned to Linda, who was now awake, clutching the blanket tightly around her. "You hear that?" James whispered, though he already knew the answer. Linda nodded, her face pale, her eyes filled with terror. "It's inside the house." James swallowed hard. He reached under the bed and grabbed the baseball bat. He kept there, his fingers tightening around the handle. The knocking grew more violent. Boom, boom, boom. James slowly got up, his body stiff with fear. He moved toward the bedroom door, gripping the bat so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He hesitated for just a second, then reached for the doorknob. The moment his fingertips brushed the cold metal, the knocking stopped. A silence so thick filled the air that it felt unnatural. Then, a voice. Low, raspy, right on the other side of the door. "Let me in." James jerked his hand away as if burned. Linda whimpered, covering her mouth with both hands, her entire body trembling. James took a step back, then another. A deep breath. Then he turned the knob, just enough to crack the door open. He peeked into the hallway, empty the dim light, cast long, eerie shadows, making everything feel distorted. Then James saw it. At the far end of the hallway, just outside the children's room, a figure, tall, unmoving, cloaked in shadow. Its head tilted slightly as if it was watching. James felt his stomach drop. His breathing stopped. Then the figure took a step forward, a slow, deliberate step that made the wooden floor creak. James slammed the door shut and locked it, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "We need to get the kids. Now." His voice was barely above a whisper, but the urgency was unmistakable. Linda nodded frantically. She didn't need to be told twice. James grabbed her hand, and together they crept toward the children's room. Every step felt like an eternity, the floor beneath them betraying their presence with faint creaks. James pushed open the door to Emily and Noah's room. The children were still fast asleep, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding around them. Linda rushed to Emily's bed, gently shaking her awake. "Sweetheart, wake up. We have to go." Emily stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Mummy, what's wrong?" James scooped up Noah, who whimpered but remained mostly asleep. "We're just going for a little ride, buddy," James whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. They hurried back toward the front door. James reached for the handle, twisted it, but the door wouldn't budge. It was locked. No, not locked. Sealed. As if something was holding it shut from the other side. Then, the laughter began. Low, guttural, echoing all around them. Linda clutched the children close, her breath coming in shaky gasps. The laughter twisted into something worse. A whisper right against James' ear. "You can't leave." James spun around, swinging the baseball bat wildly. Nothing. But the air had changed. It felt wrong, heavy, suffocating. Then, all at once, the lights went out. The house was plunged into absolute darkness. Emily screamed. Noah began to cry. James fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking as he turned on the flashlight. The beam of light cut through the blackness, and then they saw it, standing at the end of the hallway. Closer now. The figure, its hollow eyes fixated on them, its mouth curled into an unnatural, jagged grin. Linda let out a choked sob. James took a step forward, gripping the bat tighter. "Leave us alone," he shouted. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. James didn't wait. He grabbed Linda's hand and pulled her toward the kitchen. "The back door," he gasped. They stumbled through the house, their steps frantic, desperate. James reached the back door, yanked it open. Cold night air rushed in. Freedom. They ran. Out into the snow-covered yard, their breaths coming in quick, visible puffs of air. James didn't stop until they reached the car. His hands trembled as he fumbled with the keys. Click, click. They threw open the doors, piling inside, slamming them shut. James turned the ignition. The engine sputtered. Once, twice, then silence. The car wouldn't start. Linda sobbed. "James, please. Please get us out of here." James turned a key again. The engine groaned but refused to come to life. Then the temperature dropped. Frost spread across the windshield, creeping over the glass like skeletal fingers. Then the laughter returned. Inside the car, right behind them, James' breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he turned his head. And there it was, sitting in the back seat, grinning. The last thing James heard before everything went black was his own scream. James woke up to an unbearable silence. A thick, suffocating darkness surrounded him, pressing in from all sides. His body felt heavy, sluggish, as if submerged in ice-cold water. His mind screamed at him to move, to run, but his limbs refused to obey. Then the sound returned, that horrible, low laughter. It echoed in the void around him, growing closer with each passing second, a sickening mix of amusement and malice. James' breathing came in shallow gasps. He forced his fingers to twitch, his arms to respond. Slowly, painfully, he managed to move. He was no longer in the car, he was somewhere else. Somewhere wrong. His surroundings flickered into focus, dim and distorted, as if he were looking through dirty glass. The walls were old, cracked, stained with something dark. A single, flickering light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting shadows that twisted and stretched unnaturally. James pushed himself up, his hands pressing against the cold, concrete floor. His head throbbed, his vision swam, but he forced himself to stay alert. "Linda," he croaked, his voice hoarse. Silence. "Noah." Panic surged through him. He stumbled forward, reaching for the walls to steady himself. His mind raced, trying to piece together what had happened. The car, the figure, the laughter. Darkness. A door stood ahead, slightly ajar. Beyond it, the hallway stretched into infinite shadows, disappearing into the void. James swallowed hard, his pulse pounding in his ears. He had no choice. He had to move forward. He stepped through the doorway, his breath fogging in the freezing air. The corridor felt endless, its walls lined with old, decaying doors, each one slightly open, each one whispering. A cold breeze brushed past his neck. James spun around. Nothing. But the whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices, distorted and overlapping, crying, laughing. His skin prickled with fear. He walked faster, ignoring the doors, ignoring the shadows that seemed to move just out of sight. Then he saw it. At the end of the corridor, a single figure stood motionless, waiting. The same figure from his house, tall, hollow-eyed, grinning. James stopped breathing. The figure lifted one hand and pointed directly at him. Then, without warning, the corridor collapsed inward. James fell, his body yanked downward into the abyss. Darkness swallowed him whole. A sudden jolt slammed him back into reality. He gasped, sitting up with a violent shudder. He was in his bedroom. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting warm light over the familiar walls, the neatly made bed, the photographs on the nightstand. It was just a dream. James let out a shaky breath, running a hand over his face. A nightmare. The weight of relief was overwhelming. He exhaled, glancing over at Linda, who was still asleep beside him. He smiled, reaching out to touch her shoulder. She was ice-cold. James' heart stopped. He turned her over. Her eyes stared back at him, wide, empty, lifeless. Her mouth stretched open in a silent scream. James stumbled backward, his body shaking uncontrollably. Nana. A shadow moved in the corner of the room. The closet door stood open. Inside, something shifted. The same whisper from before, soft and playful. "I told you not to turn around." The last thing James saw was the grin. The darkness lunged forward. Nothing,